page Chav
Recording in
Beis.
progress.
In this Maamar, we started speaking about concerning the difference between how the Hamshacha was in the world, the Iker Shechina B'Tachtonim was in the world before the avoid of a person, versus the Iker Shechina versus what we accomplish through our avoida. And that's the difference between the way things were. First of all, when the world was created, before Adam Rishon was there, then there was the level of Adam Rishon. Even Adam Rishon was meant to be La'avdal Shamra. In other words, even though it's talking about Gan Eden before the Chet, so therefore it was a very high level of Gan Eden, even that level of Gan Eden needed to have the Taisvis Oiris, the additional Oiris that comes through a person's Avoida down here. And even over the level of Torah, the way we have in Gan Eden, and etc. So now, to be able to have every avodah, we need to have a Srusa D'Leila. That is Srusa D'Leila, that inspiration from above. That's the level where it says, "Vayinecheyu began Eden l'avdol shamra." That Hashem placed the Yid in Gan Eden, the Adam Rishon Gan Eden, the place in Gan Eden, setting him up in Gan Eden. That caused the Serusa D'Leila. That was the empowerment. That was the thing that gave us the koyach to be able to do whatever avodah had to be done. Then there was the negative that came in between, and the tzaddikim that brought the Shechina back down, including Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe is the Shvi, is the Chavivin, Chol Shvi Chavivin, and therefore he brought down the level of the Shechina through in first on Har Sinai, and then Vasli Migdash. And that was the idea of totally beyond everything. In other words, beyond the level of Iker Shechina B'Tachtonim. That's why the level of Beis HaMikdash has to do with the 8th day of the Meluim was the time that the Beis HaMikdash was erected. And even greater than that, there's going to be, like it's going to be La'asad Lavi Ali Asar. Ali Asar is even higher. The number 10 is even higher than the level of 8. And that has to do also with the day of HaChodesh Hazel Lachem. It's the same day of the day of the avodah when the Mishkan was erected, is the avodah the same day of a chodesh Hazel Lachem. This month for you, the chodesh means a lashon of chidush. It was amshacha from something that's higher than Seder Ishtalshus. Now he's going to explain that even with this amshacha that's higher than Seder Ishtalshus, it's already there on Rish Chodesh Nisan, that we have this idea of the Yom HaKamas HaMishkan. Then there's the next step. Once you have the HaKamas HaMishkan, what are you doing in the Mishkan? And that's why Vayikra, which speaks about the Karbanas, follows immediately after Parsh Pekudei. Last week's Parsha that we mentioned was when Moshe Rabbeinu was told you should put up the Mishkan on Rish Chodesh Nisan, and Moshe Rabbeinu Taka put it up on Rish Chodesh Nisan, so it's immediately followed by parts of Vayikra indicating, so now we're doing the Mishkan, the Karbanos. Again, second paragraph on the third page of the Maamar, page Chav Beis. It says, that's the level of the Mishkan on its own, and in the Mishkan there has to be the service of a person. That the person has to do his service in the Mishkan. It's not just enough the Amshachah that comes about from the Mishkan in addition to what was the Iker Shechina B'Tachtonim at the beginning of creation. That's what it says, a person that will offer from amongst you a carbon to Hashem. In addition to the idea that the very Mishkan itself was about the Shechina resting over there. And this can perhaps be connected with the opinion of the Ramban, as opposed to the Rambam. That the opinion of the Ramban is that the main component of the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash is the Aron. The Aron was the Hashem spoke from between the two Kruvim on top of the Aron. That was the place of the Ashras HaShechina. But still, that doesn't reach the primary purpose of the Mishkan, which is what the Rambam explains. Yes, by Aydin Yalderach, Mashakasva Rambam, there's an additional idea to having a place where the Shechina is Shoida. There's another Inyan, what the Rambam writes by Negel Beis Hamikdash concerning the Beis Hamikdash. Mitzvahs asay lasis bayis laHashem muchan lis makriv v'akarbonis. The mitzvahs asay is to make a home for Hashem. What's the purpose of that home? To have a place to offer up karbonis. So after the Maila of Asli Mikdash Chanti B'Soicham, that I make a dwelling place for Hashem beyond even what's there at the beginning of creation, I, on the top of that, have to do the avoid of karbonis. That's why, after concluding this, or after the story of erecting the Mishkan in last week's parsha and Parsha Pekudei, the pasuk talks about in Parsha Vayikra about karbonis. Vayidei karbonis, through the karbonis shu inin asrus l'sata. Now we have something that's truly an inspiration from down here below. We didn't just make a sanctuary and we want the Eibishter to come down, but we're doing something. We're serving Hashem. We're doing the avodas hakarbonis. So we reach a level that is beyond the level of the Mishkan on its own. We see in Makasov, like the pasuk concludes, Reyach nichoyach laHashem. It's a pleasing scent for Hashem. So the Chazal are puzzled, what type of expression is this? A pleasing scent for Hashem, a pleasant scent for Hashem. Where does the idea of scent apply by Hashem? Ein leguf, ein lemusaguf. He doesn't have a physical body. Maamar is also the Chazal explain, you have to look at the words nichoyach and reach nichoyach as nachas ruach. It's a play on the words. Ruach relates to reach, and nichoyach, pleasant, is obviously the simple meaning from the word nachas. So the Hashem is saying, when you bring a carbon, it's a reach nichoyach, meaning nachas ruach. Lefonai, before me, shamarti v'nasar etzoini. I said, and my will was done. It's explained about this different, why dafka by karbonis. It says, because actually, I think there's a sikha the Rebbe speaks about this. Actually, karbonis is actually also something that's beyond understanding. And because beyond understanding, the whole idea is that we are fulfilling Hashem's will. It's not because of our appreciation and our understanding. It's just because Hashem wanted us to do this. Like it's explained at length in the famous series of the Rebbe Marash called Bekacha, there's a level that's called the pleasantness for the creation, and there's what's pleasing to the Creator. The level of nachas ruach lebayre is higher than the pleasantness that's for the created being. In other words, we're not talking about physical pleasure. We're talking about even ruchnistic pleasure, even the level of neshamas and Gan Eden, etc., what they derive pleasure from the mitzvahs. The level of nachas ruach lefanai, it's for me, it's my type of pleasure. It's a pleasure of the Creator that's beyond the pleasure of the created being. And the Rebbe adds to this, we say, Mazu nachas ruach lefanai. Lefanai means higher, beyond. Like we say, before this you had that. In other words, it's a higher level. Not only is it the level of the delight of the Creator that's higher than the level of the created being, but it's even higher than the level that Hashem is involved with the creation that is called the Creator. And this is this level that we awaken and we are inspiring all the way till Lefanai, beyond Hashem's level of being created. It doesn't just remain above. And afterwards he draws it down from above to below. Nachas ruach, the word nachas ruach, l'shoin nechais darga. In Aramaic, nechais means descend. So nachas ruach doesn't just mean that this is a pleasing thing for Hashem, but it also means that this spirit that I tapped into and that I reached and so on through my avodah of doing the Ratzon of Hashem, that's nachas, that comes down, that lowers itself to us. It comes down below to be the main Shechina down here below. Again, higher than it was initially at the beginning of creation. Why must we say that was higher than what was there in Gan Eden before the sin? In the meantime, between then and now, there were the sins, and there was therefore the descent of everything that took place. Since there was the sins and there was the descents, we must say that the descent is for the sake of an ascent. So if it's for the sake of an ascent, we cannot say that the Iker Shchina B'Tachtoinim that we have now in the Mishkan through our Avodah, through our Yisrus L'Sata, through Menkanach Truch L'Fonai, is going to be the same level like then, or else, what was the point? What was the benefit? But rather, it's even higher than it was in Gan Eden. Third paragraph on the page, last paragraph on the page. We mentioned before that in every avodah there has to be the inspiration from above to inspire the person. That's why it says that that Hashem placed Adam in Gan Eden to do the avodah of the Ramach Mitzvah and Shatpsam Mitzvah, the placing him in Gan Eden, which is also like the encampments, that it makes it Ba'ifin Shal Kvius, that was something that was the empowerment and the Yisrus L'Eila before we do our Yisrus L'Sat. So we had this also by the Mishkan. The idea behind this is the after the above mentioned revelation that took place in the day that the Mishkan was erected on Rosh Chodesh Nisan in the year 2449, Ksiv says, "Vaychas ha'onanes oil moed," and the cloud of Hashem, the cloud of glory, covered the oil moed, the tent of meeting. V'kvoid Hashem Moles HaMishkan, the glory of Hashem filled the Mishkan. Vayachal Moshe love oil moed kishachna love ha'onan. Moshe could not enter into the oil moed because the cloud of glory rested upon it. V'kvoid Hashem Moles HaMishkan, the glory of Hashem filled the Mishkan. V'zel mashkos v'acharkach. Vayikra Moshe, this is what it says, after speaking about in last week's parsha about Hashem's glory and the cloud of glory filling the Mishkan. It says, he called to Moshe, and he called to Moshe. And the Chassidus speaks about this in different Maamarim. Why doesn't it say, Vayikra Hashem al Moshe? It doesn't say who's calling to Moshe. Right afterwards, it's going to say, Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe. But over here, Vayikra just says, Vayikra. He called to Moshe. Who is he? Since in the oil moed was a revelation from such a high and awesome place that's totally beyond the level of Moshe. How do we know it's beyond the level of Moshe? Because it says that Moshe cannot even enter it. It was something that even Moshe couldn't handle. So since it was such a high level, therefore there had to be an inspiration from above higher than any type of place, from a place that's higher from all types of names and revelations. And that's why it had to say Vayikra el Moshe, not Vayikra Hashem el Moshe. It's only the highest most place that could bring this about. Through that could be that Hashem spoke to Moshe until it came down saying, top of the last page, Maamar l'chol Yisrael. So in other words, first it was a level that was totally beyond everything, beyond the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. Once that level called to Moshe, so you had that first stage in this Yisrus D'Leila, then there could be Vaydaber Havaya, there could be Hashem speaking a love. Comes down to the level what's already more shaykh to us, more shaykh to Moshe Rabbeinu, the level of Yud Kei Vav Kei. And then it was Vaydaber Havaya love, lamer. What's it mean, lamer? To say, to tell over. That now Moshe Rabbeinu is even empowered that not only he can receive this revelation, but this revelation could be communicated to all Yisrael. So all of this, the Vayikra, Vaydaber, and lamer, that's all the inspiration from above that awakens and inspires from above. But afterwards, through the avodas karbonis, the inspiration from below, we reach the level that's even higher than this inspiration from above. Chassidus always speaks about that there's three levels. There's the Sarusa Dola, the inspiration from above that precedes our inspiration from down here below. Then there's our level of inspiration down here below. And then the Sarusa Dola that follows that. That's even higher than that. Because, and we mentioned this also before, that when the Hamshacha comes through our Avodah, so then, like in other places that I've explained, Hashem desires our action and our pa'ulas. So therefore, since Hashem desires our action, our pa'ulas, so when this is done through us, we draw down from a much higher level. We get it from a much greater level than even the Surus Dola Eila that preceded it. So the same thing over here. Vayikra Moshe, beyond any name, a place where Moshe Rabbeinu cannot even enter because the cloud of glory, that's not as high as what results from our avodah afterwards, in the avodah karbonis, in the Beis Hamikdash, and that we bring down Tzarech Nechayach Hashem, Lefonai, and so on. That all of that comes down from an even higher level. Second paragraph on Chav Gimel. The Inyan ba'avodah, the idea in our avodah Hashem, the Chsiv, it says in the pasuk, Sheish me'os elef ragli ha'am asher anochi b'kirbei. Moshe Rabbeinu said, 600,000 foot soldiers like that I am amongst them. So what's the level of I am amongst them? The Gam Bechinas Anoichi. So here we're talking about not about Moshe Rabbeinu. Here we're talking about Hashem. That even the level of Anoichi, Anoichi is the highest, most level. It's the first word of Daser Sadibris, beyond Havaya, beyond Alakecha, and it's not just beyond Havaya. It's also beyond the word Ani. That it's higher even than the level that I am that Hashem says I am the first and I am the last, and other than me there's no other power, which is Bechinas Pnimis HaKeser. The inner level of Keser is the level of Anoichi, is explained in many places. Comes down to Moshe Rabbeinu through the legs, through the feet of the nation. The lowest level amongst the Yidden. Because of the level of Moshe, that's in every single Yid. Since in every Yid there's a level of Moshe, therefore every Yid gets this Isrus Dola Eila. In other words, like this, we know that Moshe Rabbeinu said, Sheish me'es elef ragli amash anochi b'kirbei. So Moshe Rabbeinu was not just saying, I am among the people that are like feet, but because of the feet of Klal Yisrael, which the feet of Klal Yisrael indicates the lowest level of Yidden, they are only considered feet, and Moshe Rabbeinu is the level of head. That itself is the cause. The feet is the cause that Moshe Rabbeinu gets the level of Anoichi. The Rebbe explains this many places. Why and in whose merit did Moshe Rabbeinu receive Anoichi and connect with Anoichi? That's because of the feet. And the Rebbe says, why is that so? Because in truth, every single one of those feet, it's the level. There's a level of Moshe. In other words, going back to Anoichi B'Kirba is also talking about Moshe Rabbeinu is saying Anoichi. That Moshe Rabbeinu is the Anoichi in every single Yid. In every Yid, there is the Moshe Rabbeinu within him. And therefore, every Yid is the one that causes that Moshe Rabbeinu should be able to receive from the level of Anoichi. And therefore, since every Yid has the level of Moshe, and Moshe is the one that receives the level of Anoichi, Moshe is the one that receives this higher level through the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. So through Moshe being in every single Yid, so then to every Yid comes down this inspiration from above. Vayikra al Moshe. So it's not just when you read the parsha, it says, Vayikra al Moshe, we say, that was Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu had the revelation of Vayikra, including the what Rashi says about the love that Hashem showed to Moshe. No, the Rebbe explicitly says that when it says Vayikra al Moshe, that Rashi explains it was a calling of love. This is something that goes on every Yid. And here it's understood because every single Yid has the Moshe within him. So Hashem calls every Yid in a way of love. And afterwards, once there is this calling and this revelation and this is to every single Yid, thanks to the Moshe within him, so then every Yid, through his avoid of karbanos, whether it's the physical karbanos in the Beis Hamikdash or the spiritual karbanos that we do every day in davening, it comes down to us an even higher level than the inspiration from above, this level of the Vayikra that preceded our Srustal Asata. Last paragraph, Hine, Alpipis going to be Nazakin, according to the famous axiom or statement or phrasing of the Alter Rebbe, that a person needs to live with the times. Hainu in Parsha Shavua, that means to live with the Parsha of the week. Moving, it's understood. Shekol ha'inyanim she'Parshas Vayikra mis'oiderim b'Shavua the Parsha Vayikra, that all the matters that are in Parshas Vayikra are awakened during the week of Parshas Vayikra. In other words, when the Alter Rebbe said you need to live with the times, it doesn't just mean, okay, we're reading the Parsha of the week this week, so we got to take the message of this Parsha. When we read a different Parsha, we have to take the message of that Parsha. It goes deeper. The reason why we need to live with that Parsha is because the matters of that Parsha that we are reading in the Torah are being reinvigorated and redone and reoccurring. It's even more so that the matters of this parsha become awakened again, is because we're reading the parsha with a lot of people. In bracha lefanah, lachra, with a bracha recited before reading from the parsha, and a bracha reciting after every aliyah. Reading this in public, being the parsha of the week, reciting the brachas before and afterwards, that gives us the empowerment for our avodah now, even though we may not have been there 3,300 years ago when Hashem called to Moshe and through Moshe to each and every one of us. And through our actions and service throughout the time of Golus, especially during the heels of Mashiach, then because it's so dark, there's the extra light that comes out of the darkness, and the greater wisdom that comes out of the foolishness, in other words, the Kedusha that comes in a greater way because of the stronger klippah that's to be found now during the time end of Golus. Corresponding to the excess darkness that's double and quadrupled in the heels of Mashiach. So in other words, there's so much greater light coming out because the darkness is so much greater. In the days in Niska, Labias Mashiach Tzidkein, through that we merit the coming of Mashiach, Sheyavis Agula Mitzvah Shlema, that will bring the true and complete redemption. V'yivne Beis Hamikdash from Koime, he'll build the Beis Hamikdash in its location, like the Rambam says. V'sham Nasol Fanecha, as Mitzvah Karbanis Chavisenu, Chol K'mitzvah Fanecha, over there, we will make before you the karbanis of we're obligated in, like the mitzvahs of your will, in other words, the way you wanted it to be done. Speedily in our day, Maamar.